Hello, everybody. Duelists, dwellers, musicians, gamers, and Vikings out there in the chat. I'm Katajan. This is Dwelling of Duels. But tonight we're doing something a little bit different. Last week we played some video games. Tonight we're going to have a nice chat with our buddy here, Eric Peabody, also known as Viking Guitar. Eric, thanks for joining us.
Sure. Thanks for inviting me. It's good to see everyone and see people in the chat here.
Yeah, we got a bunch of people out there.
19.
I'm 19 something. It says 11 on my end. I'm glad you see more. But yeah, we're going to talk about just whatever, video games, gear, music, stuff like that. And yeah, I don't know if I've ever done an interview on here. I guess a few months ago we did a thing with Yes Mayhem, but that's really the last thing I've done. So I gotta get the butterflies out of my system and everything.
Yeah,
so.
Sure. If you're down with it, also, if people have questions they want to type in, as we have an opportunity to see those. I already saw someone asking about audio production stuff. So, if that works for you, that works for me.
Cool. Yeah. If anybody wants to throw any questions our way, just tag at Dwelling of Duels in the chat, and then we will I'll toss those questions in if they make sense. Well, even if they're weird ones like, boxers or briefs, maybe I'll ask you that.
Yes.
But so let's talk about your history with Dwelling of Duels. So you have 15 entries to your name. These are my stats as of a few days ago. 15 entries you've ever done, going all the way back to July 2008. 1 gold, 1 silver, 1 bronze. It's pretty good. You got the whole gamut. The gamut of the pedestal.
I don't deserve any of those. The gold in particular, I targeted a specific month that I knew I'd have a better chance of winning in. There was something like 5 entries that month, and I really poured everything into it. But
no, it was actually 3, and you beat me because I got second place.
I knew it was a small amount. Yeah. Well, congratulations on silver.
Thanks, I appreciate
it. What was my silver in? I remember the bronze was that Blaster Master thing I did back in 2009.
Ooh, let's see.
What was the silver one? Or I might have been on a collaborative effort for that got silver, maybe.
Yeah, let's see. Your gold was Ultima 6 in DOS month. Bronze was Blaster Master. Silver was with Monty and the Guitarists of Mag West.
Right.
Space
so
month.
There were like 17 of us on that track.
Yeah. That's a good track though. That's a banger.
Yeah. I was not the one that carried that track.
But that's awesome to see how many like the collaborative stuff is awesome. I always love doing those kind of things. Let's talk. Well, first of all, you playing any video games? Playing any new games?
I haven't been playing a whole bunch. I recently kind of finished up some of the holes in the From Software stuff that I hadn't played. I finally played and beat Dark Souls 2. So I can check that off the list. Wouldn't say it was incredibly enjoyable, but I did it. Nice. And then played through Dark Souls 3 and got halfway through Bloodborne and then got busy. But I've already played Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3. So, I haven't been gaming too much lately. In my free time, I've been reading and just doing stuff around the house. So,
what are you reading?
I've been going through a lot of audiobooks. I just finished, I forget the author's name. He's written a few horror books, but this one was called My Best Friend's Exorcism. And it was a very palatable, easily digestible sort of horror story. So that was on audiobook. And as far as actual physical media, that still exists. I'm reading Watership Down, of all things.
Ooh.
Which I have never read. I've owned it my whole life. The copy of the book I'm reading right now is the one that was on my bookshelf when I was 5.
Wow.
But I just never got around to it. And
is that a book made for 5-year-olds or no?
It's a book that could have been obtained by a 5-year-old. It was in the kids section at libraries and stuff. We could go off on a whole tangent about this. Yeah. It's not as bad as The Reputation in terms of how traumatizing it is. It's a slightly more adult novel, but I'm enjoying it. It's good to read. I'm backfilling an unchecked thing in my literary history. So
Nice. Yeah, that's one of the things with this pandemic, being locked down and stuff. Besides just doing music, I've also gotten back into reading and like going through my own bookshelves and reading things, and
Yeah,
got a library card and I feel so cool, things like
that's
that.
awesome.
So reading's good. I've actually been reading, there's a book by Ari Herstand, which is called How to Make It in the New Music Business. That was a fun read that I just finished up last month. Cool, like insight into stuff,
What year was it
royalties.
published?
2016, so it's
Okay,
relatively recent. Like, oh yeah,
because
I wouldn't read any like 90s music business
yeah, new
literature.
music is relative, with the advent of Napster.
I mean, it's already a little dated because they're like, yeah, you can get really famous on Vine and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh
Yeah,
man,
it just
already
it
gone.
goes so quick. I have a few of those that I keep meaning to read, and I see recommended all the times, but it
Yeah,
becomes outdated so quickly.
yeah,
But
that
if
one's
you're
good.
enjoying this one, I'll have to check it out.
I would definitely recommend it. The guy that wrote it has a blog that is very up to date, and I've seen plenty of times before. So, somebody
That's
in the chats asked, "What are you drinking?"
I am drinking this is a normal drinking glass. I have some chilled vodka in here and 3 olives on
Ooh,
a toothpick. It is a homebrew martini, vodka martini. I don't know. It tastes good. So thank you.
very nice,
Yeah.
very
Thank
nice.
you for asking.
And I'm drinking water. Hydrate or dihydrate, everybody. Yeah. That book I mentioned was written by Ari Herstand, to whoever's asking in the chat.
Are those
Um,
initials R period E period, or
oh
is the
no,
first
actually,
name
it's
ARI?
ARI.
Ah, there you go.
Ari.
Ari,
Okay,
I think.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you've been doing music for as certainly as long as I've known you, because I met you like one of the times Viking Guitar Live played at Magfest. But even at that
Mhm.
point, you had pretty much been pretty well established as a skilled producer. How far back does your origin with like recording and making your own kind of recording your own music and working on that stuff? How far back does that go for you?
Um, a ways. So I started playing guitar at 14. That was in 1998, 1999, and started being in bands, just local, metal bands and stuff. And that all culminated kind of in the 2003 area. Um, I was tired of doing local bands. In Santa Cruz County, where I grew up, there were a lot of drug problems, and I was tired of people flaking and just all of the problems that everyone runs into with local bands. We had a singer. I talked to him one morning. He was supposed to show up for practice that day. I didn't see him for 7 months. And the only reason I saw him at
Wow.
that point was he was knocking on my door to say that as part of his recovery process, he had to apologize to the people he had wronged. And he had been doing meth the whole time. So
Oh,
anyway, I got fed up with local bands and I got into home recording because I still wanted to make music, but I didn't want to rely on other people. Um, so I had been interested in that sort of stuff for a while. I'd actually I'd been way into metal for most of my life, but I went through a period of time where I was using Fruity Loops, which you and I were talking about earlier, and doing techno trance stuff back in the late 90s, early 2000s.
nice.
Um, and then trying to adapt that process to recording metal. And at the time, the technology was very so I pushed through it. I put out an album of original stuff in about 2004, and the process was so painful and terrible, and I was so unhappy with the result that I stopped playing guitar. And then around 2008, I had some more time and decided to pick it up again. And I was so rusty at guitar and didn't know shit about recording or production in the first place that I decided I need to learn this properly. And I figured, well, what easier way to do something non-committal than just do some covers of video game music? I knew about the mini bosses, and
Hmm.
by that point, I had discovered Metroid Metal, which was, I'm sure for a lot of us here, a pretty big inspiration, not just from an arrangement standpoint, but a production standpoint. And Stemage had a blog post on his site because enough people had asked him how he recorded that he decided to just post a little thing. Hey, here's how I do it. And obviously that's very outdated now, but that was kind of a template for me to at least have a starting point, and it went from there. Um, So I started doing DoD entries as a way to kind of hold myself to some sort of schedule of getting better at guitar and recording and mixing. And
So did all of this happen around like the 2008 era, like 2007, 2008, where you got
yeah,
back into recording and stuff?
yeah, 2008, 2009. And then I did a follow up to that original album in early 2010, put that out. And that was kind of a landmark thing for me because it was more just proving to myself, okay, I can do this
Right.
regardless of how it turns out. And then the next year, I'm like, well, I've done enough of these DoD entries and I am enjoying this video game music stuff. Maybe I'll put out an album of that. And this was shortly after the Contra Rocked and Loaded album had come out. So I felt like, well, this is
Yeah.
something people do.
Right.
And it can even have good artwork sometimes, you know? So I did that and hit up Nate, and it just kind of went from there. And then did another album, and a few years later, was talking to some people about, people were suggesting I put together a band to start performing it live. And I was still so soured on band experiences. My answer was no, 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 no.
Yeah.
And then I realized since this was only going to be at festivals and places where all of these other people were going to be at, I didn't have to pick people near me. I had to pick people that were available for these things, which opened it to, people that were actually responsible and talented and reliable instead of local burnouts.
Yeah. The
Um,
birth of the convention band.
exactly. We weren't the first by any stretch,
Well,
but
yeah.
I kind of, once again, I followed the Metroid Metal template. Grant had, when I first started listening to his stuff, Metroid Metal as a band was not a thing. But we kind of went from there. Anyway, it's just gone from there. These days, I'm doing audio work full time. It's my sole source of income. A lot of mixing and mastering. I do voiceover and narration stuff also, kind of just fill
Nice.
in the cracks. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I to people in the chat, I forgot to put it onto the stream here, but if you type !Viking in the chat, you can get links to all of Eric's stuff there if you guys want to peruse that. So yeah, nowadays you're working in like audio production and stuff. Are you still working a lot on, like, how much of that time is dedicated to your own kind of like passion projects, whether it's video game music or like other things you're working on versus paid paid work?
It depends. I mean, you do freelance work, so there's a certain feast or famine element to it.
Yeah.
There are weeks where it's 10 to 12 hours a day, and you're dealing with sending and receiving emails at whatever time works for the client because you're in different time zones. And then there are other times where as long as you put in a couple hours that day, you're going to be fine. I just finished up mixing and mastering a live recording that accompanied a video for a VGM band that I can't name, but it's definitely someone we all know.
Okay.
It was my first chance to work with them. I'm really stoked about how it turned out. But this was a thing they were doing for a client that hired them to, produce this video package. And it was a 10-day process. It was 45 minutes of music that needed to
Wow.
be completely mixed and mastered from start to finish in 10 days. And since it was video recorded also, there was no opportunity to go back and retrack anything or change anything. So, that was a fairly intensive situation. But,
Mhm.
generally it's
Were you doing a lot of like repairs to the original audio tracks in any way, or were you just kind of stuck with whatever you've got, like flubs and all?
um, luckily there weren't too many flubs.
That's good.
This group of people is
Talented musicians,
very
I'm
good.
sure.
There was one problem. One of the microphones used was a wireless mic and had some really gnarly transmission problems that
Mhm.
probably wasn't present when they did their sound check, and then a battery died or something like that. So
Ooh.
there was a lot of cleanup there. Isotope RX was my friend.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
RX is good on everything. Just slap it
it's
on
just
there.
magic.
Yeah, certainly magic. I have a question in here. Did you ever use a tracker back in the day to make any music, or were you only like an
A dog
digital
eye.
audio workstation? Yeah.
I learned how to use Mod Tracker enough to do one or two songs. This was probably back in 2012. Frank Martin, Hiosphoros. I'm
Oh
sure
yeah.
some of you guys know him. He kind of gave me a primer on it. I've done some stuff with him in the past, and I found it interesting. It's not a format that I personally find conducive to my own style of creativity. It's something I do want to do again in the future because it, whenever I think about it, you get that internal guilt of, oh, this is something I don't know too well, you
Yeah.
know?
So many
Um,
other people know how to do this really good.
and you know how it is with the internet because like
Yeah.
of all of your friends, 5 people will know about it and post about it. And in your mind, that turns into, oh my God, I'm the only guy that doesn't know this thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that's the answer to the tracker question.
Yeah, tracker. The only experience that I've ever done with trackers myself is dumping mod tracker files so that I can get like split individual tracks or something for like Unreal games like Alexander Brand and stuff because those were all composed in trackers and stuff.
Yeah.
But
You mean
I've
silent?
seen them and I've like messed around with them a little, but they're a bit far out of my comfort zone. I'd
Yeah.
much rather just work with the sequencing in Reaper or something like that.
Yeah, and I don't get me wrong, I definitely appreciate
Oh
the
yeah,
authenticity the trackers provide. I think my problem with it was that I approached it from I'm going to write a song in a tracker, and it would have made because I'm a guitarist first and foremost. It would have made more sense for me to do a mock-up in a DAW and then open a tracker and actually create it in there based on the rough.
right. And it's funny that you say the authenticity of it because the funny thing is that with a lot of those older tracks, like composers who did soundtracks for a lot of like NES games,
Mhm.
from what I've heard, a decent amount of them were not programmers at all, and they were musicians. They would record demos of their tracks, send it to the sound programmer, and then
Right.
that person would transcribe it into the NES stuff. Like I know the composer for Gimmick has that, and you can find those original demos. But yeah,
There's some video documentation of Bobby Prince, I think his name is, for the Doom stuff, right?
okay, yeah,
Working
yeah,
on that, yeah. But
nice.
it's just I mean, there's so many spheres of audio production that you can research and deep dive on. It's one I've only looked into when it happens to cross my radar.
Yeah, I get you
Yeah.
there. So let's talk gear. I know that you just upgraded from your Pod HD 500, right?
Right. Yeah.
To what do you have now? That's
I
for those who don't know, that's a floor model amp simulator that you would plug your guitar into and hook it up to your power board and all that stuff. Ooh,
Ooh, it
he's got it
happens
in
to
the
be right
gator
here.
bag and everything.
Yeah, so I don't use this sort of thing for recording, but this is the new floorboard. It's a Pod Go. Um, and I mean, line 6 is line 6. They have a reputation. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. And I used the HD 500 because I needed something. I'm kind of a micromanaging anal retentive asshole with audio stuff. And so when we started talking about doing Viking Guitar as a live project, I wanted to make sure I had control, over how my guitar sounded. And I knew we were going to conventions. I'm not going to fucking fly a amp head and a 4x12 out there. So
Yeah.
the HD 500 was good for that. And the only reason I upgraded, it's still a great unit, but it was just a little big and a little heavy for air travel in particular. This thing is half the size and
What
weight.
year did the HD 500 come out? If you know.
2011 or 12?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Have you had a lot of time to mess around with the Go?
Not a lot, but it's needed less time.
Oh, that's good.
The nice, like from a tech standpoint, mind you, like I said, I haven't done a deep dive on it yet, but the tone overall quality, I had no qualms with the HD 500, and this sounds completely as capable, and I'm sure it's probably more capable. But the main thing is it has the ability to load in your own impulse responses for cabinets.
Nice.
And if anyone follows my YouTube channel knows I'm a big impulse response guy. That is the main part of your guitar tone, for a lot of stuff. And so for me, that made crafting tones on this thing a lot easier because instead of having to go through and do the whole thing, the first thing I did is load in the IRs that I use from like my short list for recording.
Yeah.
And
Get the
all of a
exact
sudden I'm
same
like, well,
sound.
it's friggin' 90% of the way there.
Yeah.
How much delay do I want? I'm good,
Right. Right.
But yeah, it's a perfectly capable unit. I still need to test it more before October.
Oh. What's happening in
before
October?
in October in Pittsburgh. First weekend, I think it's the second and third. I got the okay from the promoter today. Viking Guitar Live is having their first full band performance since early 2018. So if anyone
Beautiful.
in this chat wants to book air travel to Pittsburgh on the first weekend of October, we would love to see you there, because I have not seen any of you in forever, and I haven't played a live show in forever, and I'm looking forward to it.
That's awesome. You heard it here first, folks. First week
Breaking
in
news.
October, does it have a name, or is it an unnamed event?
I mean, we could give it a name. I don't know what the name is.
It's Dwelling of Duels Fest. We'll just
there it is, official, the first one. And
yeah, full band. That is awesome. I am very excited to see that. I'm going to do my best to make it up there.
Like that's kind of the other thing about, the fact that I could choose whoever I want to be in my band, since, I don't have to pick locally. These guys are literally some of my best friends in the world, Adam and Grant and Dan and Ryan. And it sucks that, I haven't had a chance to really see them in a long time. I've seen combinations of them and stuff, but like we haven't all been in the same room in 3.5 years.
Right.
So this is pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about it.
Nice. Yeah. I'm definitely going to try to make it out to that show. That sounds like an awesome time.
And I can't announce the other bands because I haven't checked on that, but I can tell you they are MagFest mainstays. They're people and potentially love. So I think you'll enjoy it.
Guys,
hey, Cinder's in the chat.
Critical Hit is playing at this convention too. I'm just kidding.
You son of a bitch.
Question in the chat: can you recommend some great affordable impulse responses? And I second that question because I'm always looking for new ones.
Yes, and give me one moment.
Take your time.
I have a whole folder called impulses. I just got one, Mendel IR. Now, mind you, this stuff is very subjective, because I do the stuff I do, and not only am I a metalhead, but there's a specific subset of heavy metal that I prefer the production quality of. So this is what I've found. The Mendel ones are pretty good. I'm gonna post the link in the chat here.
Oh, I hope it'll let you.
One other thing I've really enjoyed, the Ownhammer and Redwires ones are really good packs to have a lot of versatility. But 3 Sigma, the number 3 and then the word Sigma, is a company that does really good ones for the type of stuff I like. So, I mean, you can't go wrong with Ownhammer or Redwires. The Mendel ones and the 3 Sigma ones. 3 Sigma is good for other stuff too, but in particular for the type of like, kind of semi-modern thrashy metal stuff I like, those are the ones I would recommend. And the 3 Sigma pack is like €20. I somehow screwed up my Firefox and it always gives me prices in euros.
Your location settings. You have a VPN running or something like that?
That might be what it is, because our main Wi-Fi hub here does. But anyway, that's a good starting point. I specifically would recommend staying away. The Joey Sturgis ones are not amazing. And there's a company called Ugritone, Ugritone. They're not a great company. They have one of the worst chip VSTs I've ever heard in my life. All of their impulses sound like garbage. And I don't know. I'm pissed at them because I cannot stop getting ads for them on social media, and it drives me nuts.
And you're like, just ignore, block. I don't want to see this company anymore.
Yeah. So anyway.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. That is a star-studded review for Ugritone from Viking Guitar.
Also, hi to everyone in the chat. I can't say it individually, but
no, go ahead and say it individually. We can wait.
Oh, okay. Well, hold on. Hey, speaking of which, you said this was going to go half an hour. I'm fine with it going longer if you're okay with that. We obviously have eaten up a lot of time already.
So no, the plan was half an hour. We would chat. I was gonna play a little bit of music for 10 minutes and then come back for 20 minutes to round out the hour. So
sounds great.
So you're stuck with me for a little while longer.
That's fine.
Yeah. What do you know the ones? There's like T-Bone. Our Shiz and DoD friend T-Bone is obsessed with this one specific cab sim called like SR High Pres 1 or something.
Oh yeah, the S Pres High.
Are you familiar with that one? Is it as good as he
very
says?
much so, and it's really good. That's the Catharsis pack. I think. Yeah. So I got it right here in my browser. Catharsis, Espres High. The Espres, there was a variation of that I liked. The two off hyphen Pres High was the one I preferred over the Espres High. But yeah,
Oh, okay.
and that's the thing about Impulse is you can find killer stuff for free. You don't have to spend money on this.
Yeah.
And that one is still completely viable. Along the lines, I want to recommend there is Scott Elliott. There's a mixing and mastering engineer based out of the Ukraine named Scott Elliott, and he has some courses up on a website called Pro Mix Academy. And mixing courses are tricky because you never know the background of these people. You never know if, well, I've had my, Scarlet solo for 3 months. I might as well start teaching people how to produce,
Yeah, you never know if they made a Kickstarter for a Viking Guitar University thing. You never
Yeah,
know.
exactly. Snake oil.
Yeah.
But Scott Elliott has a course called, oh God, where is it? I just broke my browser. Anyway,
Your European browser.
he has a course called Guitar Tone Mastery that's really good. A lot of it is stuff any one of you looking at it probably already knows, but there's a lot of just cool little things in there. And most importantly, he has a really regimented process that he uses to dial in guitar tones. And I picked that up about a year ago and learned a lot from it. So for anyone that's asking questions
Nice.
about what impulse responses do you recommend, what amp VSTs, how do I set up a signal chain, how do I gain stage, all that stuff, that is a course that's worth the money. And it'll answer all those questions for you. And Scott's a great dude, and it's worth looking at.
Awesome.
There, I've said
There's so many options with VSTs and amp sims and
yeah,
plugins and cab sims and all that stuff. It's infinite combinations. It's crazy. And then if you want to
yeah,
go even a step further and mic your own cabs, it's a whole other thing. I just think I think it's wonderful that presets exist, and I thank the Lord for them.
yeah.
Especially with going back to the floor modelers for a second, I have
Mhm.
a Line 6 Firehawk, which
Oh yeah,
I think that was like a 2015 model or something like that.
yeah. It was after the HD series, but before the Helixes and stuff, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
It was right before Helix came out. And yeah, I use half of the stock options on there or like tweak them a little bit, find the one guy find the one preset that uses like the dual rectifier chain to get that real like Black Album Metallica kind of sound. And I
yeah,
just modify from there. And it's just fantastic. Half of those settings I never
yeah.
even tweak, like sag or bias on amps and things. So
Well, let me just speak to that really quickly because that's completely viable and that's how I did things for a lot of time. But there's a lesson in there, not just about guitar tones, but about mixing in general. And I know when I was getting started, mixing for me for a long time was just a function of I don't want to do this, but I know I have to in order to put music out, and that was the main goal for me. And it was horribly limiting to not really know what I was doing and being reliant on not just presets, but like when I would tweak something to a point where I felt it was balanced. And then I was like, okay, I can't change anything on the next song. And that was a big source of stress for me for a long time because as I wanted to do different things, or if, I got a new computer and a plugin suddenly didn't work or worked differently, my whole thing would come crashing down. I'm like, shit, I can't replicate this. And, same thing with the patches, like finding a preset you like and then tweaking it to make it sound like how you want it to is great. But once you kind of wrap your head around all of it and put in the time to learn all of it, the feeling of freedom and liberation is just amazing. And it opens
yeah.
up things all across the board, like I can, you know, I don't have to just mix metal now. I feel like if someone throws something at me, I know how to work with it, and it's a cool feeling. So for anyone out there, if what I'm saying sounds familiar, the whole don't touch it, it'll break thing, if your mix structure is a fucking Jenga puzzle, break it down, like drop the thing apart and look at each piece and figure out how it works, because it is worth it in the long run. Very much so.
Yeah, that's very true. I remember like when I had spent a bunch of time with synthesizers and stuff like that and learning how to get like, the boingy sound that I want from whatever a synth was. All of a sudden it was like I wasn't just hunting presets to find things. I could take any sound that already existed and be like, oh, I'll tweak it to be this tone that I want, things like that.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And I
I
still use presets,
oh
I
yeah.
use them for inspiration, and sometimes I'll find one and I'm like, well, shit, I don't have to tweak this. This is exactly what I want.
Yeah.
Um, but
Just
having
never
the
use
option
the
is
first
important.
preset on anything. That's illegal. You can't
It,
use the very first preset. All right, so we have a couple tracks from you that
Mhm.
we're going to take a few minutes here and listen to. Take a little intermission here. This is about 10 minutes worth of stuff, 9 minutes, 10 minutes. We got two tracks we're going to listen to. First, the newest track from Viking Guitar Live. We're going to listen to
Correct.
Belly of the Beast, which is a Life Force remix.
Hmm.
That is a really good track. I have been listening to it a lot, and we're going to let you guys hear it as
Thank you.
well.
I'm glad.
And then after that, we're going to listen to your remix from Bloodstained Curse of the Moon 2 called Tomb of the Gods.
Yes.
We're going to jam those out. We'll see you all in the chat on the other side with more conversation with Mr. Viking Guitar after this. I feel like I'm doing a commercial read, but that's okay.
Coming soon.
Hello, everybody. We are back. That was two fantastic tracks. One by the last one by Viking Guitar. That was Bloodstained Curse of the Moon 2. Before that, we had from Viking Guitar Live,
Mhm.
the full band, Belly of the Beast, Life Force. I feel like I'm doing the Dwelling of Duels listening party right now. Like, all right, everybody, we just heard this fantastic track from Life Force called Belly of the Beast. But I get to talk with the person who actually made it. So,
Yeah, and you
yeah,
announced the artist.
yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
can put the artist name out there. Great. So, you, in addition to doing audio production and recording and mixing and all that stuff, you also do mastering. You've
Correct.
mastered, in my mind, countless albums that I've seen. Like every single compilation album, it seems, that has come out for the past couple of years, you've had a hand in mastering. Um,
There have been a number of them, yeah.
yeah, I know you did when I, you certainly done a bunch of all your Danse Macabre albums, I believe you mastered. The Syndrovania Productions ones, of course.
Well, yeah.
Um, I think didn't you master a couple of the Patient Corgi albums as well?
Yeah, I did their Echo the was
Yeah,
it Echo?
Echo,
Yeah,
Echo the
Sound
Dolphin.
Waves.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was another one of theirs I did that I'm blanking on right now. I did not
Was
do
it
their
the
Christmas
Chris?
one.
Wasn't the Chris? Oh, tribute album 64.
Tribute 64, that was the other one. That was a while back, but yeah. And
Yeah.
one of those had something obscene like 100 tracks on it
Yeah.
or it yeah.
Yeah. Good times.
Yeah.
What when you go into mastering an album. So I think a lot of people confuse mastering, like album mastering, with mix bus mastering, or master bus effects change, whatever it is.
Mix bus processing, yeah.
Yeah, that's what you would call it. That's the word.
Hmm.
What how do you distinguish those from each other?
Um, it's a larger topic than we could, get into without having a dedicated session. Historically, mastering was about, ensuring things were up to a certain standard, and it's the definition has very slowly changed over the years. For me, and I think for a lot of modern producers that are, not necessarily working with mixes that are done by labels and stuff like that. It's kind of a twofold thing. My goal at mastering is to make it sound as good as possible. And that sounds like an obvious thing to say. But when you're working with a lot of clients that are either mixing their own things or, hiring other mixing engineers that are not as experienced or just starting out, the main thing to keep in mind is that you are literally the last step before it gets released. So half of the job is just quality control. A lot of it has to do with not even processing anything, but listening through it and going like, well, there are problems here or there, or this should be changed, or trying to determine the line between subjective and objective feedback. And I'm very fortunate. I have a treated listening environment, and I have been able to put some money into some high end gear. So I'm lucky enough to have a setup where I can hear things that some other people can't, just by virtue of the equipment I'm lucky enough to use.
Right.
So working with a lot of the clients in the VGM community and a lot of first time bands and stuff, that's a big part of it, is being, okay, I can hear what you're going for, but here's what you still need to change in the mix.
Yeah. Yeah. Having that set of objective ears that could listen to it, right? I
Yeah.
know, for instance, this time last year, you mastered the album that I put together for the PC Gamer show that they
My
did
God,
there.
was that a year ago?
That was a year ago, yeah. And I remember there were things that you pointed out to me that it was like, man, I would have never even noticed this. Tiny things like, oh, I heard this little pop that happens for 5 samples worth of audio at this exact timestamp, and I'm like, man, how did he hear that? Like, there's those. It's the really, really fine attention to detail with those, and also just general mix stuff. That definitely does help out with that.
Yeah. And I'm glad it helps. And it's interesting because, so much of the way I think about it is when you go from writing music to performing music to mixing and then to mastering, there's there is both art and technique involved in every stage of that. But the the proportion of creativity versus, technical processing kind of slowly does this sort of thing as you move towards mastering. So yeah, the first part is just listening to it and going, okay, what needs to even happen before I touch this? And then from there, there's mastering is there's a certain amount of client tending to involved also, because that's a stage where things are going to potentially really change or not change much at all. And depending on the aesthetic that the client is going for, what the mix is supposed to sound like I did an album for an artist called Baron von Future just a few months ago, and it's kind of electronica type stuff. But he was from the beginning very specific that he didn't want to play into the whole loudness wars thing. And if anyone is here listening to this because you're interested in mastering, I don't need to explain what the loudness wars is.
Yeah.
So the process with him was very different than what I would do for a modern death metal client or something, where it's in a lot of cases supposed to be as brick walled as possible without causing unnecessary artifacts. So, with Baron von Future, there was a lot of back and forth about actually measuring LUFS levels, loudness units, full scale, LUFS, it's a loudness measurement. And, doing analysis of his stuff compared to, Chemical Brothers stuff, and also dance music from the 70s and 80s to make sure that we were, keeping things in a certain dynamic range. So there's that whole side of things. And then when it actually comes down to processing, it can sometimes be very light-handed and sometimes very heavy-handed. Some of the masters I've done, I've used only very light EQ to take out a few little things, maybe some dynamic EQ just because at certain points, little parts are poking out in ways they shouldn't. And then, maybe a compressor and a limiter in sequence to make sure that we get it loud without being too loud. There are other songs I've mastered where the client will give me a mix and then a reference, and they're like, yeah, I want it to sound like this. And I have to make the call where it's like, well, if you were aiming for that with your mix, clearly giving you feedback on how to get it there is not going to change things because your listening environment isn't conducive for you to do that. So then I have to go through and chop the song into segments, do different EQing and dynamic EQing and multi-band compression on each one, and, do the whole rigmarole. Like my mastering chain on some songs is 3 plugins or 2 plugins, and on some it's 9 to 12,
Wow. So it's really dependent on what the quality of the track is originally. Like if you got a track that was mixed by someone who's like impeccable, like beautiful mix coming in, and you're like, all I need to do is a little sparkle on there, that's it, or something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas another one could come in and it's going to be just a salvage job, kind of.
But that is true, but it's not just that. Like, there's a whole discussion about when you take the two phases of mixing and mastering. There are people like myself that offer both services, and it's not that I offer mixing or mastering. I will do one or the other, or I will do both. And there's a very valid argument to be made against not going to the same person for both, because once again, I'm going to name drop Grant again. Stemage is an exceptional audio producer and engineer in every way, and he and I have different aesthetic choices we make, but we both know what sounds good. And there's something to be said for one of us mixing something and the other mastering, just because it's a different listening environment, it's a different set of ears, and it's one more chance to catch things,
Right. It's a collaborative experience.
Yeah. And the guiding light is to keep remembering that at the point that you say it's done, that's it. And if you missed something that should have been addressed, it doesn't matter if it's something where the recording guitarist or drummer fucked something up, or the mixing engineer made a bad call. If you're the one that lets it go through, it was a problem that should have been addressed during mastering, either by sending it back for a revision or fixing it yourself. So having a second set of ears, a second professional listening environment is very advantageous when you have the time or the resources, as an artist, to hire 2 people or that sort of thing. Now, from my standpoint, because a lot of my clients either don't know the difference or want to go to one person for it, there are advantages to that too. If like there's a client of mine, a band called Pitch Black Manor, that I've been working with for a while, and um, they're really cool dudes, and they and I are pretty much on the same page about how their stuff is supposed to sound. And I would be reluctant to send out that stuff for mastering after I mixed it, just because the goal point is so specific, and I've been doing that for them for a while now.
Right. You're dialed into that exact spot, and to try to get someone else to reach that same sweet spot would take too much, a decent amount of effort.
Yeah, I mean, it would take effort, but it also brings in the variable of, you never know. Like, but at the same point, like, Grant or some of the other people I work with regularly, even if I'm not looking for aesthetic feedback, I'll sometimes send a finished master to one of them and be like, look, I've been working on this for 9 hours today. Not that mastering usually takes that long, but if you're doing mixing and mastering,
Right.
just to have someone listen through, and sometimes they come back and they're like, there's a really ugly noise gate problem on this thing. And sometimes, like I said, if you've just been in that zone for
You
so
just
long,
don't
you
notice
don't
it,
even,
and it's got
yeah, you don't notice it. Or you do you notice it the first time, you marked in your head, oh, I need to fix that. And then you've listened to it 30 times since then, and now it's just part of the song.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
That certainly has happened to me a couple times where like something changes from being it's like, are you familiar with Adam Neely and his videos and stuff? The
Mhm.
repetition legitimizes argument. Like you hear it 30 times in a row, and now you're like, yeah, that's just part of the song. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of that also goes to people who listen to even like a poorly mixed song. If you listen to it enough times, you'll just be like, this is the correct mix for this song because I've heard it
Yeah.
so many times.
And it's kind of moving this away from mastering just for a moment, as people that this is JC, who just multiple times posted repetition legitimizes that.
Repetition
That's a good joke.
legitimizes.
I like that joke. But as cover artists, a lot of us that do video game covers, that's one of the obstacles we have to face also, because you know if you hear the original version of a song a million times and then someone does a cover of it, it's a different experience than if someone releases an original song. If someone releases an original song, the audience that hears that is hearing that just as it is,
Right. No other context to
no
compare it
other
against.
context. A cover, you always have the original to compare it to. And this is something else I tell people that are, just doing their own music. A lot of times there's decision paralysis, and after a thing is released, they're like, well, I should have done X, Y, Z differently. The thing to remember is that you're the only one that knows how it might have sounded differently. The audience that hears it, they're either going to like it or not like it. If someone comes to you and says, hey, I really like this song you did, the last thing you want to do is be like, well, I should have done fucking this differently and that. They don't goddamn know.
Yeah,
And they
they
like
have
it the
no
way it
idea.
turned out. They might have liked it less if you did it the way you want it. And sometimes for you, in your mind, you have this feeling of it should have been better. But, sometimes that's just some ambiguous, nebulous, I wanted it to be better, but you can't even define it. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's the
No, I totally agree with
tangential
that. I
tear.
think that's
Yeah.
a fantastic piece of advice. I heard that same thing a while ago where it was like the vision of whatever project you're working on, whatever creative thing it is that's in your head
Mhm.
is always only going to be in your head. Your own skill is basically how well you can translate that onto the paper. So to you, it might be like, oh man, it was, 65% of the way to what I had in my head. It would have sounded so cool. But no matter what, like you said, people are their only interpretation of it is what you actually put out. And
Right.
hopefully they like it. And if they do like it, you should never be like, well,
Yeah.
it's bad.
And music, all artwork is very subjective. Even audio production stuff, it's a bit more objective in some ways, but the ways that sound evolves and develops and production develops is people trying new things and trying different things. And as artists, our music, the way we look at it and the way we write it, there's something to be said for the fact that our opinion of how something turns out is ultimately just our damn opinion. It's not objective. Like if you have a vision of a song and you only get it 65% of the way there and release it, who's to say that released version, isn't actually better for a lot of people than the one you would have made it if you
Right,
had
yeah.
been able to get it 90% or
Maybe
100%.
your version of it would have been too crowded with the arrangement. Maybe you would have had too many instruments. It would have sounded buried and
No,
muddy and
no,
things like that. No,
none of
of
us would have
course.
done that.
Of course not. We are very good with our instrumentation choices.
Right. Yeah. We don't
Uh,
crowd things. Not
don't
as lead
crowd the mix
guitarists.
box. That's some advice I always heard, and I don't exactly know what it means.
Which advice was that?
Don't crowd the mix box. I think it means like you're always wanted to cut. You always want to cut whatever it is you're working on, like make room for other things. But specific, I've never heard anyone call it a mix box besides whatever that one.
Are you sure they weren't saying mix bus?
No, it was mix box,
Hmm.
not mix bus. But
Interesting.
I don't know.
Eh.
Who knows? I'm not sure if this next question is going to basically be the answer you just gave, but if you had to give one piece of advice to DoD contestants, whether they're just getting into music production or if they've been doing it for a while and they want to get better, do you have any one piece of advice that you would give or that you would have wanted to receive when you were learning?
From a creative standpoint, and also kind of from a technical standpoint, don't focus on perfection. Getting something out is the most important thing. And I'm not saying to, short shrift your stuff and cut corners that you're cutting. But it's very easy to get focused on, well, I'm just going to keep working on this until it sounds how I want. And if you're just starting out or, even for a lot of time, it's not going to sound how you want. And if you focus on just trying to reach that goal, you're suddenly going to realize that years have passed and you've never released anything. But do the best you can at the time with the knowledge and tools you have at your disposal, get it out there, and then don't fucking listen to it for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Then go back, listen to it, and be honest with yourself. Okay, what worked with this? What didn't? And then for the next song, focus on those things. Think of every release as a time capsule of what you could do at that time, which is tricky because you want to be emotionally invested in what you're doing because you care about it and you want it to turn out well. But you also need to kind of divorce yourself from it because otherwise you're never going to do anything. So kind of from a nebulous, life advice sort of way, that's what I'd say. From a technical standpoint, there are hard limitations for certain things. You can get by with doing a lot of stuff without having good gear, and a lot of the stuff being advertised to you is not something you need. But with very few exceptions, there unfortunately are hard limitations with things. And if you really want your stuff to sound good, and I'm not talking about a good arrangement or a good, performance or anything, but if you're serious about the audio engineering side of things, you are going to need to put some money into gear. And that's not to say you shouldn't do it before then, but you're going to be fighting an uphill battle. And the main things are room treatment and proper monitoring, whether that's a decent set of headphones, because they are out there, or good monitors or that sort of thing. Yeah.
These are $20 headphones that I've just used for so long that I know what everything sounds like on them. So,
right.
Bad advice.
But the analogy I use is if you had a line drawing in front of you, and the line drawing is the raw recorded tracks, and you wanted to color that in a way where the color looked perfect. If you're sitting in a room that has one dim yellow colored bulb in it, no matter what colors you pick, it's going to look weird, because then you're going to take it to another room that has a dull green bulb and it's going to look different.
That is a fantastic analogy.
Thanks.
That I've never thought about.
I use it a lot.
Nice.
And that's the problem, is that, like, even if you're checking on other reference systems, they all have flaws, So if you're mixing on shitty desktop speakers and then go listen to it in your shitty car speakers, yeah, it's going to sound bad, but you're not going to be able to go back to the other and fix it. A well-treated room with good monitoring equipment is the closest you can get to a pure, neutral, bright white light. And if you do that, you can pick your colors well, you can do it. And then no matter what color room you go into, even though that's going to shed its own, coloration on things, the colors are still going to balance, even though they're fighting the impediment of that lighting in that room. So
right.
Don't let it stop you. Do the best you can with what you have. But, if you're having if you're following all the rules, if you've put in time and you're just having really a tough time making it sound good, you're going to need to either improve your listening environment and monitoring situation, or you're going to have to hire someone that has already done that if you want it to sound the way you want. There are very few people I know that have been able to overcome that without doing that. So
Yeah,
those are my two pieces of advice for audio production.
And those are great tips. I remember one of the first conversations you and I ever had, we were talking about room treatment and stuff, and I was like, "Oh, does a pile of clothes in the corner of my bedroom count as a bass trap?" And yeah, eventually I ended up going to get my own like acoustic foam and things on the walls. I still don't have bass traps, but I make do with it. But yeah,
Well,
that's
things
fantastic
help.
advice.
And the tricky thing is, like, since I'm tied in with narration and stuff also, there's a whole side of things to treating a room so when you record voice, you're not getting room reflections and stuff. And all the time I see people posting stuff like, "Oh, I treated my room, here's my new recording. It sounds great." And they've put up, just a little bit of foam and the recording sounds like garbage. There's all this reflection, but the problem is not only are they recording it in that room, but then they're listening back to it in that room.
Yeah.
So it sounds like everything else sounds to them, but then someone listening on a different device, all of a sudden it's like, yeah, I can hear that you're in a, 7x8 room and I can estimate how much furniture you have in there and stuff,
Exactly. Well, there's two questions in the chat that relate to both of those individual tips you gave. The first one was, what monitors do you use with your current setup?
I'm using a variety. Right now, what I do most of my work on are the JBL LSR 305s. They're very affordable, but very good for the price. I have that paired with a monitoring subwoofer, a KRK one. But I'll be the first to say they're not perfect. They're not completely flat, and no room is going to be completely flat. And I, as much as I like the space I'm in, one of its disadvantages is it's smaller, and that can present some problems. So those are my mains. I generally do most of my mixing on those, but I'm always switching back and forth between a few others. I switch between a set of headphones. These are the Bear Dynamic DT880s. And then I also have a single Behringer baritone little, mid-range response cube.
Is it one of the little mix cube things that they talk about?
It's the Behringer answer to the Aventone mix cube.
Nice.
And so the trick is that you switch between all of them. And for anyone asking this, when you start a mix, set up your relative volume levels and your panning, and then do almost all of your mixing in mono. I don't care how much stereo spread you're going to have in the final song. If you do your mixing in mono, you're going to actually hear frequencies clashing and that sort of thing. And then when you switch it back to stereo, you'll have to make some adjustments, but not many. That'll help big time. But anyway, that's just part of it. When that's done,
do you still have your desktop background that says like check the mix in mono or something?
I can't believe you remember that, man. Yeah, for a while I did. Yeah, my Windows background for a while was just text on black background that said check mix in mono, because when I was first starting, that was a obstacle I had.
It's a huge obstacle for people because it's something that so many people it sounds better to you in stereo, so you're like, why would I ever mix in mono? But there's so many good reasons to do it.
Yeah, and I've heard people argue against it, saying, well, mono doesn't matter anymore, and it absolutely fucking does, because not only are people listening on their single phone speaker, but like anytime you're listening on a source that you're not positioned by so you can hear the stereo spread, it effectively collapses to mono anyway. If you're at a party and you're in the next room. And the other thing too is, like, regardless of what the ultimate playback situation is going to be, if you're listening in mono, you will hear where the frequencies clash between instruments much better. If you're using stereo as a way of not hearing that, then you're not hearing the picture.
Yeah, definitely agree.
Anyway, so I do all my production on those, but then still I go and check on other things. When I'm done with it, I bounce it, I toss it on my phone, I listen through the phone speaker. I listen through at least 2 different Bluetooth commercially accessible cheap playback devices I have. I listen in my car. We have a small little turntable with some not super amazing speakers upstairs. I run it through that stereo receiver and listen through there. Um, like I mixed and mastered Mega Beardo's latest EP, and we finished it. And then when he released it a couple months later, Sindra and I lived together, and I was up in her office as she was poking around online, and she happened to play it, and I heard it through her desktop playback speakers, and I had this moment of, oh, thank God, it sounds good through these,
The ultimate fear of like, oh no.
Yeah. There is no upper threshold to how much you can spend on room treatment and monitoring. So, I'm not going to be able to spend $30,000 on a professional set of monitors because that's just how it is, but I don't think that's a limiting factor. It just means you have to take some extra steps to make sure things sound good,
Right. I feel like someone who, in a way, like if you had a $30,000 set of monitors, right? How many of the
Yeah.
people in the world have a $30,000 set of monitors, right? And also how many of them are going to listen to the mix you make, right? None of them.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
that's a valid and an invalid point because yeah, there's always going to be, if the further you get up there, the smaller a percentage you're in terms of how people are going to listen to it. But at the same point, if I am mixing something and I want the most universally translatable playback, obviously I want to have the highest level of detail and scrutiny, because
and the
that's
flattest
just
response and all that.
exactly, it's safer. Like if I take it to an extreme, if I mix on nothing but the built-in microphone on my 2012 iPhone, obviously that means that anyone else that listens on that same device, it'll sound exactly how I intend. But that's there's a lot of people that
It's
aren't
very
listening
limited.
on that,
Yeah.
but the higher up you go, the greater chance there is that whoever listens to it is not going to encounter something you didn't intend,
That's true.
Um,
I'm not trying to
yeah.
imply that like good
No,
monitors are bad, but yeah, I don't know. I don't really know
no.
where I was going with that argument.
But well, I mean, no, it's a good question to ask, and I've
Yeah.
I've seen that as the response.
I
Like I
feel like there's
see
diminishing returns is all I'm trying to say. Like,
that's exactly what it is,
yeah.
But the thing I try to fight against is, I'm active in a lot of Reddit audio production communities, partly because I find work through there, and partly just because I don't like misinformation. And when I see people saying things like, well, I just mix on my ear pods because that's what people are going to listen to anyway, it drives me nuts, because
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure a percentage of people are, but if you really want to shoehorn your audience into, the only people that are really going to hear how you want it to sound are the people that happen to use that or worse playback devices, you know, from my standpoint, if you care about the music you're making to the point that you've put in the time to write it, to record it, to do whatever it is you're doing with it, you're doing a disservice to your art to not make sure other people can hear it the way you want them to hear it.
Yeah.
So that's the short version.
I've seen some mixes released where they always say like sounds best on headphones or something, and like sure it does sound really good on headphones, but yeah, like you said, it doesn't sound good on most other things.
Right.
Can't hear half the reverb effects or delay effects or things because they get phase canceled when you listen on a speaker or something like that.
God,
So
yeah, and that's the other thing with mixing in mono is you'll catch phase cancellation stuff,
yep,
and
that's
that can
number
be
one.
devastating.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been plenty of times where like I've got, oh man, there's so many cool effects on this guitar. Let me check this in mono because I've had this problem before.
What guitar?
Yeah, the guitar is immediately gone.
Yeah.
Here's
So you said there were two questions?
yeah. So well, there's been more questions that we can go to as well. But the other
What?
question at the time was talking about when you were talking about don't let the project sit just for the fact for the sorry, what did you say? Release
Yeah, think
things,
of it as a
finish your
time
projects.
capsule.
Yeah,
Yeah,
think of it
yeah.
as a time capsule. JC in the chat says, when do you call a project done? Do you set a certain amount of time that you work on only one thing, or do you just know when the piece is finished?
It can be sort of nebulous, and you kind of end up developing a taste for when it's done. And part of that is the reason why you have to put stuff out too, so you kind of get a sense of your own threshold. But in the past, before I was doing this regularly enough to have a system in place, for me, it was when I got to the point of endless changes that weren't really improving anything, where it got to the point where I would listen to it in my car or something, or some other playback device. And I go, well, I need to change this, that, and the other. And I'd change it and it would sound different, but not better. And then I do it again. And one of the other things to watch out for is, if you're referencing other songs, like how does my song sound compared to this song? That's great. And that's very important. But then you can run into the problem where all of a sudden you listen to a different song and you're like, oh no, wait, that's the one it needs to sound like.
Yeah.
And then you just start friggin' chasing your tail and going in circles. So if you realize you're doing that, stop, take a day or two off so you can rest your ears, listen to as much different stuff as you can to kind of clear your palate. Go back, pick what you think are maybe the 2 or 3 best mixes, listen to them back to back, and just pick one. And the truth is, at that point, it probably doesn't matter, because once again, the people listening to it are just going to hear what you give them. They're not going to know there was this other mix where there was a bit more, 8K in the cymbals, or, you had the guitars panned a little differently. They're not going to fucking know. They're going to hear it and think, okay, do I like the song? And then as a secondary thing, they're going to go, oh, does it feel weird to listen to? It's fine. Get the music out, get people listening to it. And the other advantage of that is, as you release things, even if you don't think it's good, people will start giving you money for music at some point.
Yeah.
And what you can do with the money is you can get better equipment, which makes it easier to get the sound you want.
Wait, so people exchange money for goods and services?
Dude, yeah, exactly. So I did an album. The second VGM album I did was called Made of Metal. And listening back to it now, there are tons of mixed things I would have done differently. I did that in 2011, so 10 years ago. But with the money from that, I was able to buy a subwoofer, a mixing subwoofer. And all of a sudden, my stuff started sounding better because I could hear things below 60 hertz,
Right.
So, and it's not that, the people that bought that album obviously enjoyed it, and there's nothing wrong to them with the mix, or if there is, it doesn't, detract enough so they didn't want to buy it. And at the end of the day, what matters is if the people you're trying to connect with enjoy what you're doing, technical process be damned. Like, obviously getting as good of a mix and master as you can increases the chance that people will like it. But if in retrospect you wish you had done it differently, but people still like it, so what? Your opinion is just one of many at that point.
Exactly. And very good advice from Mr. Viking Guitar.
I try.
There's one last question that I think is very interesting that I think I would like to hit before we wrap things up from Evil Sonic.
The room size layout.
The room size question. Yeah. What is the ideal room size / layout put on the wish list for a studio space?
Just mix outside. Just mix outside.
No reflections. You'll be totally fine.
No reflections. It's great. Set up a generator. It'll be loud.
Yeah.
But you can work with it.
That's what the headphones are for.
Yeah. There's no stock answer. Generally, you want a larger room instead of a smaller room, but not a huge room. That doesn't fucking tell you anything. The important thing is to make sure that the room isn't negatively impacting the sound you're getting. So how much acoustic treatment you're going to need to put up depends on the problems your room has. I would say that one of the harder things to address is external sounds. So if you have a really, really good room that you're always going to be hearing traffic and, your neighbors talking about shooting people or something, don't pick that one. Pick the one that's not quite as good, but you can not get distracted. Acoustic foam that you're going to buy at Guitar Center or, Sweetwater or something is probably not going to do too much. You want broadband absorption. The main materials used, Owens Corning 703 or Rockwool Safe and Sound. Those are fine things for DIY treatment. And you just want to set up your room where, it sounds better than it did without it. Because like I said, there's no ceiling to how deep you can go into this. And I'm very happy with my space, but I could definitely, if I wanted to break it down and put some money into it, I could redo it and probably have it sound better. But, focus on where you're sitting. There is a guy, I forget his name, but the guy that runs Cush Audio has a YouTube series, and he has a video about
those.
Oh, it's
I love
great.
that series.
And
Gregory
my
Scott,
God,
that's his
he
name.
has the sexiest,
He
silkiest
does.
soothing
I was.
voice.
He had
Yeah.
some point that tied into a different thing we were talking about, and I was like, I'm not going to bring this guy up. He's not that
Oh,
popular,
he's
but
fucking great, man. Yeah.
he is really good.
Um, but you can work in a relatively small room as long as you know, think about what you're doing and read up about it. Like I said, my room is not as big as I would like it to be, but it works fine. And part of it is learning the room. Part of it is treating it. But read up on where to set up your monitors. And then the main thing is treating your first reflection points. And what that is like, if you sit where you sit and your monitors are where they are, the sound comes from your monitor straight into your ears, but it also goes in other directions. Right.
Yeah.
And so what you want to think about is where is the sound going and hitting walls or ceilings and then bouncing from there into your ears. Put absorption panels there. You want to try and trap that sound from bouncing back into your ears. And if you do that, like if you just get a couple of panels and put them up at the first reflection points, you're already way better off than you were before.
Yep.
Then if you have more, I've got some above me here to catch those. I've got a bunch of stuff in the back. I've got bass traps in all the corners. You can go nuts. If you have the option for like, a 16 by 20 room, that's going to be great. You don't want a square room if possible. If you have an angled ceiling, I mean, there's endless stuff. Like
So
the
many
whole,
things.
acoustician technical setup of these things. There are people that create whole careers out of that. So I'm not going to be able to, tell you everything
Sum it
about
up
it
in 10 minutes.
in 10 minutes. And I'm not even an
5
expert in
words
it.
or less. That's what it was.
Yeah. 5 words or less. Make it sound better, buddy.
I
Uh,
uh I totally agree with all that. And I think it's really important for people to understand how like if you're more of like an analytical kind of person and you like to understand how things work, reading
mhm.
up on like room modes and things like
Right.
that, which are the
Standing room
actual,
modes.
yeah, the standing waves and whatever that make rooms sound like, that's why some spots in rooms are way more bassy than other things.
Mhm.
Understanding why that happens, understanding the idea of reflections and things like that can get you a really big part of the way to um, understanding how to treat it and what your treatment does, because that's
Yeah.
always important is like,
Why you're
it's
doing what you're doing.
why you're doing it. Yeah. Why does me
Yeah.
moving this knob on this compressor make it sound good? I don't know. Once you
Yeah.
know why, then you can use it more effectively. Things like that.
Yeah. You start making decisions based on intended effect instead of just making decisions and then seeing what it does and then settling on something.
Yeah.
Um, One more thing I want to say about the room setup thing is you might just end up in a shitty situation where, it's a super reflective room. Sometimes you just can't find the goddamn materials to make the panels, or, you don't have the money to pay someone to make them and they can be expensive or whatever. There's nothing wrong with mixing and mastering in headphones. There are obstacles you will face with doing that, but there are situations in which it makes more sense to just, you know, drop 300 or 400 bucks on a dedicated set of, production headphones, not fucking Beats by Dre or anything, but actual production headphones. Um, that ultimately could be a much more cost effective and manageable solution than, trying to jump through a million hoops and spend a couple grand on treating a room that is really not ideal to be treated. So, but here's the other thing. Don't let it stop you from making music. I did
Yeah.
the first Viking guitar album on desktop speakers, in a corner of a big room that was also our living room and our kitchen. It
Yeah.
you
I
can
think the both of us came from humble beginnings with like no treatment and nothing like that. And you have plenty more experience with probably less lower quality setups than my entire musical career so far. So
well, I mean, the main point is that, creating music, if you're driven to do it, it's an important thing. And it's easy to get caught up in any of the upgrade route rat races. Whether it's, buying a better, VST compressor or, room treatment or better monitors or whatever. Even practicing your instrument can end up being a procrastination tool for writing music. If you're like, well, I need to get better at this before I make the music I want to. It's easy to let years go by.
yeah.
Stephen King, favorite author of mine, in one of his books is referring to, surprise, surprise, an author character of his. And he makes a statement that it's very easy to mistake procrastination for research. And they're talking about someone that's trying to write a book and all they're doing is just reading up more about the topic they're going to write about, and they're not actually doing anything. And it's the same thing with audio stuff. You know, if you want to make music and don't let anything stop you. There are always ways you can make it better in the future. You know, but do what you want to do. You know, I feel like I'm not as productive as I should be with my own stuff. And I know I've put out a decent amount of stuff, but I find myself caught in that, you know, you wake up one day and you're looking at, you know, Craigslist for another guitar and you're like, why am I doing this instead of just recording a song, you know, or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Write stuff every day, even if it's bad. That's
sure.
how I get better.
Yeah. Do we have any other questions that have come up in here?
I don't think so. There's a lot of people talking about headphones and things like that.
Yeah. Hey, those, no pun intended, excuse me. Those Bayer Dynamic DT 770s, those are good headphones. So yeah, I am not surprised.
Nice. Yeah. So Eric, thanks for joining us. Where can people do you have anything new coming up soon? You said you have this Viking Guitar live show coming up, but yes. I know there's something else. So tell us all about it.
Yeah. So tomorrow, Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific, 2:30 p.m. non-Pacific Eastern. There's an organization that's putting on an event called Save and Sound. I'm on it because a game I had music in called the Metronomicon is having a panel about their game, and I'm doing a live stream performance there. And that's going to have music from that game, some other stuff I play live, and a brand new Viking guitar song with a special guest that I've announced. It's Angel Hernandez, Masochist, who's an amazing drummer and chip artist. But if you're around, it'll be on the front page of Steam, which is a new feather in my cap. But if you awesome. Follow me on Twitter, I'll be posting about it. I'd love to see you there. It will be recorded, so you can check it out afterwards. There's a Pittsburgh show. That's about it.
Cool. What is your Twitter and social media handle so people can find you?
Pretty much everything is just Viking Guitar. So facebook.com/Viking Guitar, twitter.com/Viking Guitar, youtube.com/etc.
Okay. Awesome.
And if any of you need mixing and mastering services, don't get me wrong. I don't mean to make you feel confident about your own mixing and mastering. You'd be far better off hiring me to do it. All joking aside, if anyone needs that stuff for your music, I'm always happy to talk about that stuff. I have a rate I charge because this is my, means of income, but I always offer discounts for VGM fam because that's how I started.
Yeah, and I can totally vouch for Eric here. Like I said, he mastered the album I put together last year for PC Gamer. You mixed a couple tracks that I've been on, like we did a Steel Samurai track that you mixed before. It's turned out great, and
right.
You are very, very good at what you do.
Well,
that's why you make the big bucks.
It's why I make some bucks.
Some bucks, yeah. But I gotta say, still waiting on Dead Horse.
And it's in the works. I did a little update video about that a couple months ago, but it's just, pandemic fatigue has been a real thing. And,
no, I totally get it. The guy here who's been working 5 years on another WASD album, I understand.
What's WASD? I don't remember.
It's an acronym, we all suck. Goodbye. Thanks again for coming out, Eric, and to everybody in the chat, thanks for coming and tuning in. This is going to go up on YouTube, so if you want to watch it again, you'll be able to see that. If you want to join the Dwelling of Duels Discord and chat and see other things we're doing, there's the link there in the chat. We're at dwellingofduels.net. This Saturday, we're having the mini games month listening party, Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And that's going to be a lot of fun. We have some more we've been doing a couple more streams. We did a stream last Friday where we played Jackbox with people. We're doing this interview here with Eric. Saturday, we're doing a stream for the listening party. We've got more stuff planned for like the next 3 weeks or something like that. Mm-hmm. We're trying to get affiliate on this channel so that we can get some Twitch subs and let you guys get emotes and all those things. So keep your eyes peeled. Check out our Twitter page at Dwelling of Duels. We're on Facebook as well. We also have a Patreon where you will be able to see next month's Dwelling of Duels themes posted early on there for just being a patron at any tier on there. So yeah, thanks so much everybody for tuning in. We're gonna let I'm gonna play some tunes here to let the evening run out. Y'all can chat amongst yourselves.
I got to do the thing.
Okay.
I always got to do the thing. If we're signing off, it's
Oh
important
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
everyone,
Okay.
you got to keep the world metal.
Keep the
So
world.
thank you all. Austin, thanks for inviting me onto this. This has been great. It's not often I get to talk more of the tech side of things with people, and I enjoy it because it's nerd stuff, and that's nice.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's been so much fun. Everybody, Viking Guitar, check him out tomorrow. The Save and Sound stream is happening on Steam. It'll be on the front page, or I think they're doing like a whole festival, so that'll all be streamed there.
Yeah, Darren
Follow.
Korb will be there at some point.
Ooh, very
You all know
nice.
him. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're best friends. Keep your eyes peeled on Viking Guitar's Twitter feed to see when all that stuff is going up. And once again, thanks everybody for tuning in. This is Dwelling of Duels.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.